August 17, 1945. Guadalcanal. The rain has stopped, but water still drips from the canopy above, falling in irregular patterns that sound almost musical against the jungle floor. The war is over. Japan surrendered 2 days ago. Yet in the makeshift prisoner compound near Henderson Field, nobody seems certain what that means. Marine Private First Class Robert Hayes stands guard duty at the wire perimeter, his Thompson submachine gun resting against his shoulder in a posture that has become second nature after 3 years of combat. He is 22 years old and feels 50. The jungle heat presses down like a physical weight, turning the air thick and difficult to breathe. Inside the compound, 47 Japanese prisoners sit in deliberate silence. They do not speak to each other. They do not acknowledge their guards. Some stare at the ground between their feet. Others gaze toward the distant mountains as if searching for something that might make sense of their situation. Their uniforms, once pressed and proper, hang on frames that have been reduced by hunger and disease. Ace has been told these men are dangerous. He has been told they cannot be trusted, that surrender means nothing to them, that they might kill themselves or attack their captors at any moment. The official briefing used the word fanatic 17 times. Yet watching them now, in this quiet hour before sunset, he sees only exhaustion. Captain Thomas Bradley approaches the wire, clipboard in hand. He is the compound's commanding officer, a man who served in China before the war and speaks enough Japanese to manage basic communication. His orders are clear: process the prisoners, document their names and ranks, prepare them for transport to a larger facility on New Caledonia. Simple administrative work. Except nothing about this war has ever been simple. Among the prisoners sits Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto. He is 31 years old, though the jungle has aged him beyond recognition. His family came from Kyoto, where his father taught philosophy at the university and his grandfather had served as a minor official in the Meiji court. Yamamoto joined the army in 1937, fought in China, then transferred to the South Pacific in 1942. He survived Guadalcanal's initial invasion, survived the naval bombardments, survived the desperate counterattacks that turned the island into a graveyard. What he cannot survive is this: the knowledge that Japan has surrendered. That the emperor, descended from the gods, has spoken the words of defeat. That bushido, the code that has defined his entire existence, now means nothing in a world where his nation has laid down its arms. He sits cross-legged in the mud, his katana long since confiscated, and tries to understand how a man continues living when honor itself has died. The other prisoners watch him carefully. Yamamoto is the highest-ranking officer in the compound. By tradition and military protocol he should be their leader. But he has not spoken since the surrender announcement. He has not eaten. He sits in perfect stillness, as if his body has become a statue and only his eyes remain alive, tracking some internal landscape the others cannot see. Hayes notices this. During his watch shifts he finds himself observing Yamamoto more than the others. There is something different about this man. The way he holds himself. The way the other prisoners maintain a respectful distance, not from fear but from something closer to reverence. Hayes has killed Japanese soldiers. He has seen them die screaming for the emperor, seen them clutch photographs of families they would never see again, seen them weep with pain and rage and despair. But he has never seen one sit so perfectly still. On August 18, Captain Bradley calls Yamamoto to the administrative tent for processing. The lieutenant rises slowly, his movements precise despite obvious weakness. He walks to the tent entrance, pauses, then performs a slight bow before entering. The gesture surprises Bradley, who has grown accustomed to the hostile silence most prisoners maintain. He returns the gesture awkwardly, uncertain of the protocol but sensing its importance. Through an interpreter, a Japanese-American sergeant named Daniel Kobayashi, Bradley asks the standard questions. Name, rank, unit, home prefecture. Yamamoto answers in a quiet voice that carries unexpected clarity. His responses are formal, stripped of emotion, delivered with the cadence of someone reciting from memory rather than speaking from thought. Bradley notes the details, feeling an odd discomfort at the ritualistic nature of the exchange. The lieutenant speaks excellent English, Kobayashi mentions after Yamamoto has been dismissed. He studied at the Imperial Naval Academy before transferring to the army. His father was a scholar. He could have had a very different life. Bradley looks up from his paperwork. Why are you telling me this? Kobayashi pauses. Because he's going to kill himself, sir. And I thought you should know he's not just a fanatic. He's a man who believes he has no other choice. That night, Hayes cannot sleep. The jungle sounds press against the darkness, a constant chorus of insects and distant thunder and things moving through the undergrowth. He thinks about his brother who died at Tarawa. He thinks about the friends he has lost, the men whose names he sometimes forgets until something suddenly brings them back with painful clarity. He thinks about the Japanese soldiers he has killed, wondering if any of them sat as still as Yamamoto, wondering if any of them struggled with the same question. How does a warrior survive when war itself has ended? In the compound, Yamamoto lies on his back, eyes open to the darkness. He is thinking about his father's last letter, received months before Guadalcanal fell. The words return to him now with the precision of scripture. Honor is not found in victory or defeat, but in how a man conducts himself when all choices lead to darkness. The cherry blossom falls at the height of its beauty not because it wishes to die, but because that is its nature. Live as the blossom lives. Fall as the blossom falls. Let your life be a poem others remember. But Yamamoto cannot see the poetry. He sees only the contradiction. Bushido demands that a warrior never surrender, yet Japan has surrendered. Bushido demands loyalty unto death, yet the emperor has commanded his soldiers to lay down their arms. Bushido demands honor, yet what honor exists in a cage? The code that gave his life meaning has become a labyrinth without exit. Every path leads back to the same conclusion. A man of honor cannot live without honor. On August 19th, Captain Bradley receives orders from division headquarters. The prisoners will be transported in 3 days. They will be processed at a larger facility, then eventually repatriated to Japan once the logistical arrangements are completed. The orders are routine, bureaucratic, empty of anything resembling recognition that these men have spent years trying to kill American soldiers and are now being treated with a courtesy that seems surreal given recent history. It begins with an apple. The mess sergeant, a thick-armed man from Nebraska named Williams, has received a shipment of fresh fruit, the first in weeks. Most goes to the American personnel, but there are a few crates left over. Williams looks at the surplus and makes a decision that will echo far beyond its simple logic. Give some to the prisoners, he tells his assistant. They look half dead. When the fruit arrives at the compound, distributed by guards who seem as surprised as the prisoners, Yamamoto stares at the apple placed before him as if it were a supernatural object. Red, unblemished, still cool from transport. He picks it up slowly, feeling its weight, its reality. Around him, other prisoners eat hungrily, some weeping at the taste of something beyond rice and canned fish. But Yamamoto simply holds the apple, turning it in his hands, studying its surface. Hayes watches this scene from his position at the wire. He sees Yamamoto's hesitation and recognizes something in it. Not defiance. Not suspicion. Something closer to confusion. The lieutenant sits with the apple for nearly an hour before finally taking a small bite. The taste seems to startle him. He chews slowly, deliberately, then takes another bite. And another. When the apple is finished, he carefully places the core on the ground in front of him and bows toward it, a gesture so quiet that Hayes almost misses it. That night, Sergeant Kobayashi approaches Captain Bradley with a request from Yamamoto. The lieutenant wishes to speak with the commanding officer. Bradley hesitates. Regulations discourage fraternization with prisoners beyond necessary administrative contact. But something in Kobayashi's tone suggests this is not a routine matter. He says he has something important to say, sir. I think you should hear it. They meet in the administrative tent the next morning. Yamamoto enters with the same precise bow, then stands at attention until Bradley indicates he should sit. Through Kobayashi, the conversation begins with formal courtesy. Inquiries about health, acknowledgement of hospitality, expressions of gratitude for treatment that exceeds what prisoners might expect. Then Yamamoto's tone shifts. I wish to understand something, he says. Why do you feed us? Why do you provide medical care? We are your enemies. We have killed your soldiers. Yet you treat us as guests. Bradley considers the question. He could cite the Geneva Convention, military regulations, strategic considerations. But something about Yamamoto's intensity demands a more honest answer. Because the war is over, he says. And because you're human beings who need food and water like anyone else. It's not complicated. Kobayashi translates. Yamamoto absorbs this, then speaks again, his voice carrying an urgency that makes Kobayashi pause before translating. In our culture there is no separation between warrior and war. A samurai is his sword. When the sword is broken, the samurai must die. You tell me the war is over, but I do not know how to stop being what I am. The honesty of this confession surprises Bradley. He has interrogated dozens of Japanese prisoners, most of whom maintained hostile silence or parroted propaganda even in captivity. Yamamoto is different. He is trying to solve a philosophical problem, and the solution he keeps reaching is his own death. You're not a sword, Bradley says carefully. You're a man who was a soldier. The war made you a soldier. Now the war has ended and you can be something else. Yamamoto shakes his head slowly. With respect, Captain, you do not understand. In your culture, a man has many identities. He is a soldier, yes, but also a son, a husband, a worker. He can remove one identity and keep the others. In Japan, identity is total. I am samurai. Not with samurai. This does not change with surrender. It only means that honor requires death. Bradley leans forward. Your father was a scholar, wasn't he? Did being a scholar require him to die when one of his theories was proven wrong? Yamamoto's expression shifts slightly, not quite surprise, but recognition that someone has touched something personal. Philosophy seeks truth, he says quietly. Warriors seek honor. They are not the same thing. Maybe they should be, Bradley responds. This conversation becomes a pattern. Each day, Yamamoto requests to speak with Bradley. Each day, they sit in the administrative tent with Kobayashi translating, circling around the same fundamental question. What does honor mean when all the structures that defined it have collapsed? Bradley is no philosopher. He is a career officer who joined the Marines in 1936 because he needed steady work during the Depression. But he finds himself drawn into these discussions, struggling to articulate ideas he has never had to examine before. In America, he tries to explain, honor is about how you treat other people. It's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching. It's not about death. It's about life, how you live it, what you contribute, whether you help or hurt the people around you. Yamamoto listens intently, his face revealing nothing, but his eyes showing concentration. And if you have failed? If you have done things that cannot be undone? Then you try to do better going forward, Bradley says. You don't erase failure by dying. You address it by living differently. One evening, Private Hayes is assigned to bring evening rations to the administrative tent where Bradley and Yamamoto are still talking. He pauses at the entrance, hearing voices, English and Japanese mixing through Kobayashi's translation. He catches fragments. Honor is not static. My father would say. The emperor himself chose life over death. Hayes stands there longer than necessary, listening to these two men from opposite sides of the world trying to find common language for something neither fully understands. On August 22, something shifts. Yamamoto emerges from his daily meeting with Bradley and, for the first time since capture, speaks to the other prisoners. He gathers them in the compound center and addresses them in formal Japanese that makes Kobayashi, translating for the guards, struggle to find equivalent English. The essence is this: the emperor has chosen life. If the emperor, who embodies perfect honor, can choose to live after defeat, then his soldiers must also choose life. To die now would not honor the emperor, it would defy him. The effect on the compound is immediate and profound. Prisoners who had maintained suicidal silence for days begin talking quietly among themselves. Some weep openly, a release of tension that has been building since surrender. Others simply nod, accepting this new interpretation of bushido that makes continued existence possible. Hayes, watching from his guard position, sees men who looked like walking corpses begin to straighten their postures, to show signs of engagement with the world around them. But Yamamoto's own transformation remains incomplete. That night, he sits alone at the compound's edge, watching stars appear through breaks in the cloud cover. Hayes, on duty again, observes him. There is something in the lieutenant's stillness that suggests not peace but preparation. Hayes has seen this before, the way men compose themselves before combat, that particular quality of focus that comes when someone has made a final decision. On August 23, the day before scheduled transport, Yamamoto makes his last request to Bradley. He wishes to write letters. One to his family, one to his father specifically, one to his former commanding officer. And he wishes to thank the Americans for their treatment. Bradley grants the request, providing paper and pen. Yamamoto spends the afternoon writing in careful calligraphy, each character placed with deliberate precision. When he finishes, he folds the letters with ceremonial exactness and hands them to Kobayashi for eventual delivery. That evening, as the compound settles into night routine, Yamamoto approaches the wire where Hayes stands guard. This is unusual. Prisoners typically avoid the perimeter, knowing that approaching guards risks confrontation. But Yamamoto walks slowly, hands visible and empty, stopping several feet from the wire. He bows. Hayes, startled, doesn't know how to respond. They stand there in awkward silence for several seconds before Yamamoto speaks in clear English. Thank you for not hating us. Hayes is stunned. He has not heard Yamamoto speak English before. The voice is quiet, formal, carrying an accent but clearly comprehensible. I don't. Hayes begins, then stops, unsure what truth he's trying to express. I did hate you, he says finally. My brother died at Tarawa. I hated every one of you. Yamamoto nods slowly. I understand. I have also hated. War requires hatred. But war is over now. What is required now? The question hangs in the humid air between them. Hayes has no answer. He has spent 3 years learning to kill, learning to hate, learning to see Japanese soldiers as something less than human because that made killing them possible. Now this man is asking him what comes after, and Hayes realizes he has never considered the question. I don't know, he says honestly. Yamamoto offers a slight smile, sad but genuine. Neither do I. But Captain Bradley has suggested that perhaps honor is found in trying to answer. They talk for nearly an hour, an impossible conversation between enemies who are discovering they might not be enemies anymore. Yamamoto describes his father's philosophy, his family's garden in Kyoto, his dreams before the war of becoming a teacher like his father. Hayes talks about his farm in Iowa, about his brother who wanted to be a veterinarian, about the guilt he feels for surviving when so many didn't. The conversation is awkward, punctuated by silences, but it is real. When it ends, both men feel something has changed, though neither could articulate exactly what. August 24, 1945. Transport Day. The trucks arrive at dawn, their engines loud in the morning stillness. Captain Bradley oversees the loading with careful attention to procedure. The prisoners will be processed, documented, eventually sent home to a Japan that no longer exists in the form they remember. For most, this is the beginning of a long journey toward whatever life looks like after total defeat. For Yamamoto it is something else. He has bathed using the compound's rudimentary facilities, a luxury he requested and Bradley granted. His uniform, though worn and faded, has been carefully straightened. He has no possessions beyond the clothes on his body, but he carries himself with a formality that seems to transform those rags into ceremonial garments. The other prisoners notice this. They watch him with a mixture of respect and concern, sensing that something is coming but uncertain what it might be. As the prisoners form into lines for loading, Yamamoto stands at the end, making no move to join the trucks. Hayes, supervising the loading detail, approaches him. "Lieutenant, you need to get in the truck." Yamamoto bows slightly. "I request one moment, please. I wish to speak with Captain Bradley one final time." The formality of the request, delivered in careful English, makes Hayes hesitate. He signals to Kobayashi, who hurries over. Bradley arrives, clipboard in hand, already behind schedule. "Lieutenant, we need to move. The transport timeline is tight." Yamamoto bows more deeply than before, not a casual gesture of respect, but something closer to the profound bow reserved for the most solemn occasions. "I understand, Captain. I wish only to express my gratitude for the conversations we have shared. You have given me much to consider about the nature of honor and duty." Something in the lieutenant's tone raises alarm in Bradley's mind. He has interrogated enough prisoners to recognize farewell when he hears it. "Yamamoto, you're going to get on that truck. You're going home. You're going to see your family again." The lieutenant's expression remains calm, but his eyes show deep sadness. "My family will honor me more in death than in the shame of my survival. We have spoken of American concepts of honor. But I am not American. I am samurai. This does not change." Bradley feels ice forming in his chest. "We've talked about this. The Emperor commanded his soldiers to live. Your duty is to obey the Emperor." Yamamoto nods. "Yes, and I have obeyed. I have not killed myself in despair. I have not attacked my guards. I have helped my men understand that they can choose life. But the Emperor cannot command what the soul believes. He can command action but not conviction. My soul knows only one truth: honor demands this." From somewhere within his uniform, Yamamoto produces a small knife, not a weapon, barely more than a penknife, something he must have concealed since capture or perhaps fashioned from salvaged materials. Its blade is no longer than a man's finger, dull and pitted with rust. But in Yamamoto's hand, it transforms into something with terrible purpose. "I do not wish to dishonor your kindness," he says quietly. "I wish only to complete what duty requires." Hayes raises his Thompson. Other guards move closer, weapons ready. The compound, which had been noisy with the activity of loading, falls silent. The remaining prisoners watch, frozen, understanding exactly what is happening. Bradley raises his hand, stopping the guards from advancing. "Yamamoto, you don't have to do this. There's no honor in throwing your life away when you could go home, see your father, teach like you wanted to. That would honor your father far more than this." The lieutenant's expression shows gratitude for the words, even as he shakes his head. "You are kind to say this. Your words have weight. But I must tell you something I did not say before. In China I gave orders that killed civilians. In Guadalcanal I participated in actions that violated the codes of war. I tell you this not for forgiveness, there can be no forgiveness, but so you understand. I do not seek honorable death because of surrender. I seek it because I have done things that make continued life impossible." The confession stuns everyone within hearing. This is not the ritualistic suicide of a defeated warrior. This is something more complex. A man trying to atone for specific crimes, seeking death not as escape but as justice. Bradley processes this new information, trying to find words that might reach past the guilt and self-condemnation. If you've done terrible things, then you have a responsibility to live and try to make amends. Death is easy. Living with what you've done, that's the hard path. That's where real honor might be found. Yamamoto considers this, and for a moment, something flickers in his expression. Perhaps hope, perhaps just recognition of how much easier Bradley's philosophy makes existence. But then he shakes his head again, gently, almost apologetically. "In your culture, perhaps. But I cannot escape what I am. My father taught me that a man's character is revealed in his final action. I wish my final action to be one of acknowledgement, of your kindness, of the Emperor's wisdom, of the complexity we have discussed. But still, action requires completion." He places the knife against his throat. Not the stomach as seppuku would require, but the throat, a quicker death, less ceremonial, more practical given the crude nature of his blade. Bradley lunges forward, but Yamamoto is faster than his weakened state should allow. The knife moves. Blood appears, shockingly red in the morning light. Yamamoto's expression remains calm, almost serene. He drops to his knees, the knife falling from his hand. But he does not fall forward. With blood streaming down his throat, with death already inevitable, Yamamoto straightens his spine. He lifts his hands to his sides. And then, in a gesture that will haunt every witness for the rest of their lives, he salutes. Not a Japanese military salute, but an American one, hand to forehead in the style he has watched the guards use for days. The salute is perfect, held with parade ground precision even as his strength drains away with his blood. The compound remains frozen. Guards stand with weapons ready but useless. Prisoners watch from the trucks, many weeping openly. Hayes, who has killed men without hesitation, finds himself unable to move, unable to process what he is witnessing. This is not the fanatical suicide he was warned about. This is something entirely different. A man choosing his death with deliberation, but choosing it as a gesture of respect toward those who tried to save him. Captain Bradley drops to his knees beside Yamamoto, trying futilely to staunch the blood with his hands. "Why?" he asks, his voice breaking. "After everything we talked about, why?" Yamamoto's lips move. Bradley leans closer, struggling to hear over the sound of his own racing heart. "Because," Yamamoto whispers in English barely audible, "you tried to give me another path. That kindness must be honored. But I cannot take that path. Please, tell my father. I chose with clear mind. Not despair. Choice." Corpsman Stevens arrives with his aid bag, but one look tells him there is nothing to be done. The knife, crude as it was, found the artery. Yamamoto has perhaps minutes left. Stevens meets Bradley's eyes and shakes his head slightly. Bradley understands but cannot accept it. He keeps pressure on the wound, his hands now completely covered in Yamamoto's blood, as if will alone could reverse the choice that has been made. Yamamoto's eyes find Hayes, still standing at guard position, still holding his weapon. The lieutenant's gaze is clear despite the blood loss, focused despite approaching death. He attempts another salute but his arm will not rise. Hayes, acting on instinct older than thought, snaps to attention and returns the salute properly. The gesture seems to satisfy Yamamoto, whose lips curve slightly in what might be a smile or might be just the relaxation of muscles losing control. His eyes close. His breathing becomes shallow, then irregular, then stops. Captain Bradley remains kneeling beside the body, hands still pressed against the wound that no longer bleeds because there is no blood pressure left to pump it. The morning sun breaks through the clouds, illuminating the scene with tropical brightness that seems obscene in its cheerfulness. The truck's engines idle, waiting for passengers who are no longer moving, no longer certain if they should complete the journey or remain as witnesses to whatever this moment means. Sergeant Kobayashi stands at a distance, tears running down his face. He has translated countless words between these cultures, but he has no translation for this. The other Japanese prisoners remain absolutely silent, their faces showing not horror but something closer to reverence. They have witnessed what their culture would recognize as an honorable death, not suicide from despair, but a deliberate choice made with clear mind and respectful intention. Private Hayes lowers his weapon slowly, the salute complete. His hands are shaking. He has seen many men die, has caused many men to die, but never like this. Never with this combination of tragedy and dignity, never with this sense that he has witnessed something he cannot fully comprehend but knows he will carry forever. He looks at his hands, at the Thompson they hold, and cannot remember for a moment why he is holding it or what purpose it serves. Captain Bradley finally stands, backing away from Yamamoto's body. His uniform is soaked with blood. His face shows shock giving way to exhaustion, giving way to something that might be anger or might be grief or might be both. He looks at the assembled prisoners, at his own men, at the trucks waiting to complete their mission. "Get a blanket," he says to Stevens. "Cover him respectfully." Then to Hayes, "Detail 2 men to prepare the body for burial. We'll hold a service before transport." The burial takes place that afternoon at the edge of the compound, in ground that will later be cleared for airfield expansion but which, for now, serves as the final resting place for Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto. Captain Bradley makes the decision to conduct a full military funeral, a decision that raises eyebrows at division headquarters but which no one countermands. The grave is dug by both American Marines and Japanese prisoners working side by side, a collaboration that would have been unthinkable days earlier. 43 prisoners stand in formation at the graveside, the best approximation of military order they can manage in their weakened condition. They have no uniforms fit for ceremony, no weapons to present for a rifle salute, no flags to drape over the casket. But they stand at attention with a precision that speaks to years of training, to a culture that understands the weight of ritual even when stripped of all its formal elements. On the opposite side of the grave, a Marine honor guard stands in dress uniforms that seem impossibly clean and proper given the jungle setting. They hold their rifles with parade ground correctness. Between these two groups, enemies who fought each other with savage intensity for years, lies a simple wooden coffin constructed by the camp carpenters from scrap lumber. It is rough, unadorned, exactly the kind of anonymous container that usually holds men who died far from home and the ceremonies that might honor them properly. But this burial is not anonymous. Captain Bradley stands at the head of the grave, chaplain's manual in his hands though he is no chaplain. He has requested an actual chaplain, but none is available on short notice, and Bradley feels strongly that this service cannot wait. He reads from the manual's committal service, words designed for Christian burials, words that seem inadequate for a man who died according to codes Bradley only partially understands. "We commit the body of Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto to the ground," Bradley reads, his voice carrying over the jungle sounds. "Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in the hope of resurrection and eternal life." He pauses, then adds words not found in any manual. "This man was our enemy. He fought against us with courage and determination. But in the end he taught us something about honor that we did not expect to learn. He showed us that even between enemies respect is possible. May he find peace." Sergeant Kobayashi steps forward and speaks in Japanese, translating Bradley's words but also adding his own. He tells the assembled prisoners that Yamamoto died with dignity, that he honored the Emperor's command by first ensuring his men understood they could choose life, and that his final gesture, the salute, was a recognition that even enemies can acknowledge each other's humanity. The prisoners bow deeply, a gesture that the American guards, after a moment's hesitation, return. The honor guard fires 3 volleys. The sound cracks across the clearing, sharp and final. Birds explode from nearby trees. The echoes fade into jungle silence. A bugler plays taps, the mournful notes seeming to question everything that has happened, everything that war requires, everything that men do to each other in the name of causes they barely understand. Private Hayes, standing at attention with the rest of his unit, finds tears running down his face and makes no attempt to wipe them away. After the service, as the grave is filled, the Japanese prisoners approach Captain Bradley one by one. They bow to him with profound respect, and several speak quietly to Kobayashi, asking him to translate their gratitude. One man, a former schoolteacher named Sato, says something that makes Kobayashi pause before translating. He says that Lieutenant Yamamoto's father would be proud. Not because his son died but because he died after showing that the samurai code could adapt even to impossible circumstances. He honored both his culture and yours. The remaining prisoners are loaded onto trucks and transported to New Caledonia without incident. Most will eventually return to Japan, where they will face a nation destroyed by war, cities reduced to rubble, a population traumatized by defeat and atomic weapons. They will try to rebuild lives in a culture that no longer has clear answers about what honor means when empire has failed and the divine emperor has been revealed as merely human. But they will carry with them the memory of their lieutenant's final days. His conversations with Captain Bradley, his efforts to help his men find a path toward survival, his decision that even in death, respect for the enemy was possible. Private Hayes requests and receives transfer away from guard duty. He cannot explain this to his superiors, cannot articulate why watching prisoners has become impossible after witnessing Yamamoto's death. He is reassigned to motor pool operations, where he spends the final months before his discharge maintaining vehicles and trying not to think about the man who saluted him while dying. But the memory persists. In quiet moments, when his hands are busy with routine work, he sees Yamamoto's face with perfect clarity, that expression of calm determination, that salute held despite mortal injury. Captain Bradley writes 3 letters. The first goes to division headquarters, explaining his decision to conduct a military funeral for an enemy officer and requesting that this decision not result in disciplinary action against the men under his command. The second goes to his wife in California, describing the incident with unusual detail for a man who typically keeps his war experiences vague in correspondence. He tells her that he has seen something that changed his understanding of what the enemy was, of what honor means, of how complicated human beings can be even in the context of total war. The third letter is the most difficult. Bradley writes to Yamamoto's father in Kyoto, sending it through Red Cross channels with little hope it will ever arrive in a Japan where mail service has collapsed along with everything else. He writes that he knew Yamamoto only briefly, but that in those few days he came to respect the lieutenant as a man of deep principle struggling with impossible circumstances. He describes the conversations they had, the questions Yamamoto asked about American concepts of honor, his efforts to help his men find a way to continue living. He describes the final day, the salute, the burial with full military honors. "Your son was a warrior," Bradley writes, "but he was also a philosopher like yourself. He was trying to understand how to reconcile ancient codes with modern realities, how to maintain honor when all the structures that defined honor had collapsed. I believe he found his answer, though I cannot say I fully understand it. What I can say is that he faced his death with clarity and courage, and that his final gesture, saluting the men who had been his guards, showed a capacity for respect that transcends the boundaries of nation and war. If you receive this letter, please know that your son was not abandoned in his final hours, not treated with cruelty or contempt, but attended by people who came to admire him even as we remained his captors." The letter does eventually reach Kyoto, though not until 1947. Yamamoto's father, now teaching in a reconstructed university built partially from American aid, reads it multiple times. He shows it to his remaining family, Yamamoto's mother, his younger sister, his aunt who survived the firebombing of Tokyo. They discuss what it means that their son and brother chose death, that he did so after prolonged conversation with an enemy officer, that his final action was to salute the Americans who had tried to save him. The father writes back to Bradley, a letter that takes months to reach California where Bradley has returned to civilian life. The letter is formal, written in careful English that shows decades of scholarly study. "You have given me the greatest gift a father could receive," it says. "You have shown me that my son died as himself, not as war had made him." The conversations you describe reveal that his mind was still seeking understanding even in the darkest moment. The salute. This is not betrayal of Japanese values, but recognition that honor exists across boundaries when men of goodwill seek it. "I thank you for treating my son with dignity. I thank you for trying to save him. And I thank you for writing to tell me these things, which I will treasure for the remainder of my life." In the decades that follow, the story of Lieutenant Yamamoto's final salute spreads through quiet channels. Veterans of the Pacific War remember it, telling it to younger soldiers during later wars, using it as illustration of something they struggle to name. It becomes a story about honor, about the complexity of human nature, about the possibility of respect even between enemies. Different people draw different lessons from it. Some see tragic waste, a man who died because he couldn't escape cultural conditioning. Others see profound integrity, a man who honored both his own code and his enemy's kindness. Private Robert Hayes, after returning to his Iowa farm in 1946, never speaks publicly about the incident. But in 1985, during a veterans reunion in Des Moines, he mentions it to a reporter doing a story on Pacific War survivors. The reporter asks why the story matters 40 years later. Hayes thinks for a long time before answering. "Because it showed me that the men we were fighting weren't monsters. They were people with their own codes, their own sense of right and wrong." Lieutenant Yamamoto died for reasons I'll never fully understand, but he died with respect for us even though we'd been trying to kill each other for years. That respect, that's what I remember. Not the hatred, not the fighting, but that moment when he saluted us and showed that even in the worst circumstances, human beings can acknowledge each other's humanity. Captain Bradley, who became a professor of military history after the war, occasionally lectures about the incident at the Naval War College. He uses it to illustrate the complexity of military ethics, the challenge of maintaining human values in dehumanizing circumstances, the importance of treating prisoners with dignity even when they are former enemies. "Lieutenant Yamamoto's death haunts me," he tells his students. "Not because I could have prevented it, I don't believe I could have, but because it revealed something about honor that doesn't fit comfortably into either Western or Eastern categories. He was trying to bridge two systems of values that should have been incompatible, and in the end he honored both by choosing death on his own terms while showing respect for those who tried to give him a different path." The grave on Guadalcanal was moved in 1948, when American forces consolidated their facilities and created an official war cemetery for all casualties, including Japanese. Yamamoto's remains were repatriated to Japan in 1952, as part of a larger program returning war dead to their home country. His ashes were interred in his family's plot in Kyoto, next to ancestors who served samurai lords before the Meiji Restoration, before Japan opened to the West, before the wars that consumed the Pacific. But the memory remains. In a small cemetery in Kyoto, there is a stone marker that reads in Japanese and English, "Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto, 1914–1945. Son Soldier Seeker." May his final salute remind us that honor can be found even in the darkness, and that respect between enemies is always possible for those brave enough to offer it.